On FreightWaves Now. Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday, and welcome on in to today's edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm Kaylee Nix here with Anthony Smith.
That's right. And on this Tuesday episode, we'll get to talk to ODW's Phil Schmidbauer about the carriers more discipline going into the new year. We'll also wonder if you should have that increased discipline as well. We'll also have Noi Mahoney here to talk about two more companies announcing layoffs. But first, our top story continues the theme around a downtrending freight economy as FreightTech companies might be in trouble in 2023. Senior Research Associate Joe Antoshak joins us now with some of the latest data on this matter. Joe, thanks for being here this morning.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Good morning, Joe. It's an interesting piece to talk about, right? Because we feel like freight tech companies are still doing, honestly, pretty well if you kind of take the outliers of the ones who have announced layoffs so far this season. But talk to us about what some of the data shows on if freight tech companies should be worried going into 2023.
Yeah, for sure. So the initial idea for this survey came actually during F3. Kaylee, you were on stage with Craig announcing the FreightTech 25. And, this award series was happening in the midst of conversations I'd had with a handful of other people saying that they sort of thought that there was a rocky road ahead for freight tech companies in 2023. And, this was happening. Some of the companies that appeared on the list had laid off employees during the year. And since the award list was announced, others have announced some layoffs. So I wanted to talk to as many people as quickly as possible, and that's exactly what a survey is. So we sent this out and asked respondents a handful of questions, one about layoffs, for instance, one about perceived market demand, one about value. And we wanted to get an idea of how difficult is 2023 going to be. On the whole, respondents are fairly positive that it's going to be sort of like a ho-hum year, not a great one, but the strongest of the companies are going to do well.
Joe, is there any variance between the beginning of 2023 towards the middle part, towards the latter half?
Now, that's actually a great question. So we didn't ask specifically for second half of 2023, but our questions were geared at the beginning of 2023. So, for example, the market demand question asked respondents to rate where they thought market demand for various segments were or would be at the beginning of 2023. And these segments, by the way, we're talking everywhere from autonomous technology to visibility and kind of everything in between.
Interesting to talk about as well, because it seems like there's still a bunch of freight tech companies who are announcing big projects, even going into a thing where we know we're in a freight recession and getting really, really closer and closer to a true consumer recession. We're starting to see some collaboration where we're seeing maybe freight tech initiatives, but without necessarily commercial products, right? Thinking about the new initiative between Convoy, Uber Freight, and JB Hunt that was just announced last week. That still provides a solution in this kind of software as a service, but they're not necessarily looking to commercialize moving forward. Do you think that this is going to be a similar trend, and maybe we'll start to see some freight tech companies taking that route, really just in order to survive?
That's a really interesting idea, and I think that there's certainly a reasonable possibility for that. Now, what is interesting? So in the article, if you readers out there, if you want to go read the article that we published yesterday about this, I talked to a few CEOs and founders at various companies: Jet McCandless at Project 44, Jordan Graft at Highway, and then Hannah McClellan at Amazon Freight. And I wanted to get an idea right from these individuals who are sort of leaders in the space on what they were sort of seeing 2023 as, how they were preparing their businesses. Right. And Jordan Graft at Highway, he has a background in investment banking, and he really talked a lot about trying to read the cycles and thinking ahead to the next cycle. So Highway is, of course, an early stage startup. He founded the company Graph did in January of 2022. And the first half of 2022 looked a lot different from, these last 6 months. Fortunately for him and his company, he has this background in capital where he could think ahead to how the company was going to survive in the down cycle, right? So I think, Kaylee, when you mentioned with these freight tech companies doing some sort of deals, some partnerships that seem like they wouldn't have happened in the last couple of years, I think companies will probably get a little bit more creative on that front, and you want to earn headlines and you want to develop these industry partnerships, when maybe there are not other opportunities.
And Joe, speaking of Highway, of course, they're more going to be a unique offering catered around helping brokers. Overall, when we're looking at freight tech in 2023, do you see any part of the supply chain really faring a little bit better than others? Do you see brokers really being able to survive and be okay with the 3PLs? Do you see carriers looking to maybe struggle a little bit more on the first half, or is this going to be very, shipper forward? Is there anyone within this space that's really going to be better equipped to weather some of the storm coming up?
Yeah, so carriers are going to have a rough go of it, as we've talked about in some separate research. But in terms of like the technology segments that are most likely to have a good, or at least a neutral 2023, you got to look at visibility, right? This overall, so we put together some radar charts where, like, loosely thinking, the way you can think about them are like the more area you have here, and these are based on weighted averages, the better the chances are that the segment is going to perform well in 2023. So you see visibility here. It's pretty high on the value scale, relatively speaking. It's not super high on the layoffs scale, which means that it's still reasonably likely that they'll have to lay off employees in this next year, at least according to respondents, right? But overall, they're looking pretty good. Digital freight matching is another one that, while respondents said that it was a pretty crowded space in terms of number of companies that were offering a solution, it was seen as very valuable, right? And with a good amount of market demand. I mean, it seems like everyone is interested in digital freight matching because there's still a lot of friction there. And then a similar thing with carrier verification, vetting, onboarding. This is a pretty strong segment, and this is Highway, as we were just talking about, would sort of fall into this group. So these are the segments that seem like they have the best shot at making it out, relatively unscathed if we see kind of a deeper downturn.
So going back to the inspiration for the survey, the FreightTech 25, this year, and honestly the last few years, 2020, 2021, have kind of been filled with some movers and shakers, right? There's been a lot of movement, a lot of up and down from these companies on the list. This year, we had a ton of newcomers onto the FreightTech 25 list. Going forward into next year's results, and obviously it's like picking college football, like the way too early AP top 25 predictions, right? Do you think that we're going to be seeing more of finding some stability on the companies that are there and where they land on FreightTech 25? Obviously, Project 44 is a repeat winner 2 years in a row, but they've been top 5 now for these last 3 years running. Amazon Freight is consistently up there. Uber Freight is consistently up there in those kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots, and they stay. But the rest of those 20 is really varied. But do you anticipate maybe finding a little bit more stability, companies that have landed this year and maybe they just stay?
That's a really great question. I think that probably, given the volatility that markets are sort of undergoing right now, and what they will probably be undergoing for the near term, I think that there is still a lot of opportunity for shakeup on the list. I mean, right, a company like Project 44, they are not only a relatively long-running company, at least in the freight tech space, but they're also very successful, right, on our FreightTech 25 list and outside of it. And they just had a big funding round. So companies like that, like Amazon Freight, Platform Science, these guys will probably be kind of like in that top tier. But right, in the bottom half of the FreightTech 25, I think that there is a lot of opportunity for companies to move around still, right? Because like the space has gotten so much more competitive. where, it's not like this is a boom time with very easy money where anybody can succeed. Like you've got to have great tech, and you've got to have a really solid business model and good leadership. And I think we'll probably see some more shakeups there.
Awesome, Joe, and thanks for joining us this morning. If people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so feel free to email Antoshak at freightwaves.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Awesome, and you can head on over to freightwaves.com to get those results of those surveys and so much more from our research team. Right now, we're going to head on over to the carrier wall. We've got our first update this morning with Tony Mulvey and Donnie Gilbert.
Welcome into this carrier update. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by Donnie Gilbert. Donnie, it's Tuesday, means dry van market. Seen a slight increase here in volume levels, but it's not a ton.
Don't get excited.
Yep.
This has been an unusual year, but you can see starting back, I brought it back to June, July, August, September, and we've talked about this many times, how we've been starting the month and then finishing the month lower than what we started the month with in volumes. It's been consistently down here. We had a little bit of a pickup here. Call this our peak for the season. This is moving things from the ports on inward. So normally, when you're talking about contracted freight, you'll see that bump for fourth quarter sooner than what everybody anticipates it should be going on now, which is the bump in spot rates or spot freight. That's because of time sensitivity. Well, this year we just haven't had a lot of time sensitivity, so we haven't really seen a good bump in freight for the spot market yet, which is allow spot market rates to go down. Here we jump into the December here. We peaked out for Thanksgiving. We went down a little bit. We've come back up just a little bit, but if we go to the next chart here, I'll show you where we look at the seasonality that we normally see on the next chart for December.
One too far. There we go.
Right here, we see a downward trend. And this is the previous 3 years, even 2019, 2020, 2021. We see downward trends. And that's because the majority of the freight gets to these stores and locations before Black Friday. And now when we're talking about December, we've got our general freight that moves every day. And we have a little bit of just kind of like backfilling, restocking. Yeah. And that's why you'll see these dip down. And of course, these trends normally continue into January and February.
Yeah, and I mean, you see it back here, right? You've got 2020 and 2019, and that's kind of the trend here in January. It's slightly down, and it's not.
And this is where we start to look for, this is like, just let's get to March, let's get to March, let's get to March.
Yeah, because you see a little bump.
Yep, and you see little bumps that normally start in March because you a little bit of produce, a little bit of that spring, lawn furniture, lawn mowers, those start to pick up.
Absolutely.
Next chart here, we'll look at rejection rates. And of course, I went back and looked, Tony, there are two different events where we've dropped below 3.56. Obviously yesterday, but going back, and of course, one was when COVID, the shutdown.
Yep.
And then one was the year before. It was in 2019, I believe. It dropped down to 3.4. But our rejection rates are extremely weak. When we come back, Tony, we'll look at the seasonality of rejection rates. But first, I want to remind everybody, just after the break, Kaylee is going to come up with a weather report. We've got bad weather all the way from Texas to Nebraska to Montana. If you got trucks going east to west, you need to come back, pay attention, listen to her, because your trucks could either be wrecked, slowed, or shut down for several days, depending on the type of weather. And we have every type of weather event going on except for a hurricane.
Yep.
So when we come back after the break here, we're going to go to our headlines first, I believe, but come back and pay attention.
Yeah, thanks, Donnie, for that update. We'll be sure to check in with you again as a little later. Right now, we'll toss it over to Sydney Edwards.
With a first look at our headlines for the day, I'm Sydney Edwards. Now, U.S. import levels are still on a downward slide, getting closer and closer to pre-pandemic levels. Yesterday, there were still 18 container ships at anchor outside the port of Savannah. For November, Descartes reported just under 2 million TEUs were imported, down 12% from October and 19.4% year over year. That number is only 2.8% higher than November of 2019 and down 37% from peak levels in May. Weakening exports from China have been a key driver of the U.S. import decline, with November imports from China dropping by 85,000 TEUs versus October. Now, overall, the declines have finally hit every port, with East Coast ports of Charleston, New York, and Virginia all seeing double-digit declines. And FedEx is expanding its no-label, no-box return program, allowing customers to drop off items without packaging. The returned items will be consolidated by merchant at the FedEx office, and then it will be shipped out to origin locations using an LTL service, most likely FedEx Freight. Now, FedEx has offered this service in select markets since 2020 through a partnership with a company called Happy Returns, but is now opening up the service as an all FedEx-owned offering to market it to a larger group of customers. And ArcBest Chief Finance Officer David Cobb will retire in October of next year, and the company has started searching for his replacement. Cobb worked for 17 years at the company and helped revenue more than double to over $5 billion. Judy McReynolds, Chairman, President, and CEO, said that Cobb's collaborative spirit was valuable in helping ArcBest move into a leading logistics company. Cobb joined ArcBest in 2006 and was named CFO in 2015. Now you can find details on these stories and more at freightwaves.com and on our app. If you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, give us a like and subscribe to stay updated. After this break, we're going to have more FreightWaves Now. Stay tuned.
The 2023 FreightTech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest FreightTech news at freightwaves.com.
Hold on a second, Tony. See that? No scrapes, no scuffs, no damage. Thank you. Because we make sure each pallet is touched as few times as possible and that is handled with care, no matter where it's going. That's the precision you get from a nationwide LTL freight company with over 35 years of industry-leading experience, an entire team that's driven to deliver on time and damage-free.
XPO, your freight, first.
What are you doing up there, Bert?
The RXO folks want us to demo their technology.
That's smart.
Yeah, not really. My beak doesn't work so well on this tablet.
Well, they're paying us now, so...
I know, here goes. Our customers' freight is seamlessly moved anywhere in North America using RXO's digital platform to access over 1.5 million trucks.
That sounded good.
I think I broke my beak.
Massive capacity, cutting-edge technology. RXO.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now on this Tuesday morning. It's time for our first check of the weather. We've got multiple rounds of severe weather and multiple weather hazards going on across the country right now. We're going to start off talking about the warm side of this really massive winter storm that is set up across the western half of the United States. Let's move straight into the radar and sonar critical events right now. We've got a lot of colors up on the map, so let's walk through them. This blue one right here, the purple one that is, sorry, this big entire purple area, we've got a tornado watch in place for the northern parts of Texas analysis. This includes the entire Dallas-Fort Worth metro out to east along I-20 and I-30. Within that, we've got 3 active tornado warnings right now as well. One in Granbury, one in the actual Fort Worth metro, just to the east of Irving, Grand Prairie. This does include the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, and one just up to the north, which does include Alliance Airport in Fort Worth as well. This includes Keller, I-35 West, and all of the major and minor interstates moving around Dallas-Fort Worth today. We've got this line of storms set up right now, crossing I-35 to the north up in Oklahoma, and just to the east of, or the west of I-35 that is right now in the Texas area. But we have seen already at least one tornado with confirmed injuries and confirmed damage out there this morning, just to the west of that metro area. We're going to be watching this as it continues to develop today, because this is going to be the main line of severe storms, which will eventually consolidate into that one heavy line moving through the southeast later on tonight. But also alongside of that, we need to be watching out for some more storms popping up ahead of the main line. This will happen this morning into the early parts of this afternoon for folks all the way from eastern Louisiana up through western Mississippi, and then eventually into the Alabama area. So because of that, we do have 2 severe weather outlooks in place. Our day 1 does include the majority of Louisiana from the Storm Prediction Center, and our day 2 includes that southern Mississippi, western Alabama area. So if you're out in any of these spaces, especially around that Dallas-Fort Worth, make sure that you've got multiple weatherways or ways to get your weather warnings this morning. You've got maybe a weather radio handy, and you are paying super close attention as these storms continue to push through. Behind that, colder air filters on in, and we'll talk about that coming up later on in the show. Right now, we're going to hand things over to Christian Thomas for our first check of the social roundabout.
Thank you, Kaylee, for those weather's updates. I'm Christian Thomas, and this is the Social Roundabout. And today, I want to talk about this tweet that I found. Here it is. Twitter is auctioning off some of their items from their headquarters. So if you want to be a part of Twitter history, you can get this. The auctions include a statue of a bird, the @ symbol, some office supplies, and everything's starting at $25 in the auction, so, except for the chairs. For some reason, they're starting at $50 a piece, but definitely want to check that out if you want to be a part of Twitter history. And then switching it up a bit, Avatar, the long-awaited sequel, comes out this week. I want to show you a video found on Twitter, or TikTok rather, about the premiere from last night. Let's take a watch.
The massive LA premiere of Avatar: The Way of Water is one of the most immersive and imaginative premieres I've ever seen. Disney managed to recreate the world of Pandora on Hollywood Boulevard. If this glowing forest wasn't a cool enough photo op, there was another complete room where fans were lined up dressed in costume as the Na'vi. And they actually built a waterfall in the middle of Los Angeles. The film stars and other celebs came out to celebrate, including Sigourney Weaver, Zoe Saldana, Henry Cavill, Henry Golding, Heidi Klum, Halle Bailey, and The Weeknd.
Avatar movie held a record for the biggest box office worldwide up until Marvel released Infinity War. But I'm pretty excited about the sequel. It's a great first movie. Can't wait to see. What do you think, Kaylee and Anthony? Y'all gonna watch the sequel? Did you enjoy the first one?
Did you watch the first Avatar?
I watched the first Avatar, one of the few movies I've actually seen, and I'm always torn when there's such a long time between movies, because now I have to watch the first one to remember everything that happened to go into the second one.
I'm not gonna lie, I hated the first Avatar.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just didn't sit with me. It didn't hit with me. It didn't hit with me.
Okay, all right.
You know,
don't want to
okay.
save alien planets. It's fine.
No,
it's okay.
We got problems here on Earth we got to deal with first.
Very true, but Elon's going to ship us all up to the moon. But you know who's going to save us first is going to be Noi Mahoney.
Right, we've got our next live guest, Noi's joining us today. We just finished talking about freight tech companies in trouble for 2023, but other freight companies around the area also facing layoffs and closures. Noi, what can you tell us about 2 recent layoff announcements?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Well, on Friday, automaker Stellantis announced it was indefinitely closing one of its factories in Belvidere, Illinois. And this factory produces the Jeep Cherokee. And so this this closure will begin in February, and it will affect 1,350 workers who will be idle indefinitely, at least for 6 months, or it could be permanent. The company hasn't specified or revealed its long-term plans yet, but for at least 6 months, these 1,350 employees will not be working. And Stellantis says the reason is they're blaming this on chip shortages, COVID-related disruptions, and most interestingly, they also blame the rising cost of producing electric vehicles as the reasons for closing this factory.
And Noi, do we ever see this as a typical thing within the automotive industry where there's a shuttering of a factory or maybe some kind of temporary layoff, if you will, of some of the employees? Or is this really something that's kind of not out of the norm for them?
It does happen sometimes where a company will say, we can't get enough parts and we're going to close a shift for a week or two, but I've never seen it quite like this where they're saying we have to close the factory for at least 6 months and it could be permanent. And, these workers are going to be basically laid off during that time or permanently. So this is a situation I've never encountered before.
So it's super interesting to hear news like this where we also kind of see the conjunction of companies moving to Mexico and nearshoring their operations, where obviously labor is a little bit cheaper, things are a little bit cheaper to actually perform the work. Do you think that that is something that we could be seeing as a trend going forward, is that companies here in the United States are closing their doors, maybe taking their operations south of the border just because it's cost saving?
I think it's something we could see more of, especially for auto factories. Last week, there was a big decision about regional manufacturing of auto parts and cars. The United States-Mexico Canada trade agreement, a trade dispute panel ruled in favor of Mexico and Canada over the U.S., saying the U.S. had been applying tariffs incorrectly to auto parts that Canada and Mexico had been sending to the U.S. So what this does is basically remove those tariffs and sort of removes another cost associated with producing parts in Mexico or Canada. So this announcement from Stellantis came a few days after that trade ruling. And then while no one from Stellantis has directly said this is because of that ruling, I find it kind of curious that the two came so close together, the two decisions.
And Noi, one of the big things that we've kind of seen within the automotive division this year is that, of course, the chip shortage has been a big factor, but then it seems like a lot of equipment comes ready, and then a flurry of vehicles will come out all at once, then we won't hear anything for quite some time. Do we start to see this now with this move that there's probably a significant shift in the automotive market? Because it seems like before they were just really holding on and really being able to push out a lot of vehicles. Now it seems like, all right, this 6-month potential indefinite furlough or layoff really kind of seems like a different shift in the market overall.
Yeah, Stellantis was the latest company that, saying that we're going to stop production because of chip shortages. Volkswagen also is slowing down production at one of its factories in Puebla, Mexico, for the same reason, for lack of chips. They just can't get enough of these parts to make cars fast enough. So it is affecting not just Stellantis. Volkswagen is still affecting car manufacturers, which is one of the reasons you're starting to see more North American companies or more chip manufacturing trying to be drawn back to North America for several projects, I believe in Arizona and I think Ohio or one of the Midwestern states, where you're starting to see more announcements of like Samsung to bring more chip making back to the US or North America.
Then also on the theme of layoffs, we've got news from Motive as well, losing about 6% of their workforce. What's going on with that company?
Well, Motive, like a lot of tech companies, has had a really tough time the past few months. What happened was that Motive, like a lot of tech companies, expanded greatly during the pandemic, during the lockdown, when everybody was buying stuff from their living room, and so we had all of this e-commerce going on and increased freight movement. And so Motive, like a lot of tech companies, expanded rapidly during that period. They went from about 1,500 employees to about 3,700 employees. And Motive said, basically, you know, we expanded too rapidly. And now that business is slowing down, especially in one of their core markets, the small and medium business enterprise market, apparently that segment has really shrunk, and it's affected Motive like a lot of other companies. So Motive laid off about 237 employees last week. They didn't specify where or which locations were affected. Motive is a very large company. They have offices in Nashville, San Francisco, and Buffalo, as well as Taiwan, India, and Pakistan.
And Noi, of course, you never want to hear about these layoffs happening, but do you see more of this potentially going into 2023? Really, after we got to chat with Joe Antoshak a little bit earlier this morning around FreightTech, really the state around the industry, and now we have this story, it really does add to the expectations that 2023 will be a slower start. Do you really see that this type of activity will continue to kind of carry over into the new year, or maybe this is just kind of start to moderate as we continue to move forward?
As a person, I hope, you know, we don't see more layoffs, but I'm not sure we've reached the bottom yet in terms of, you know, the economy and spending. So we could see more layoffs, you know, the first part of 2023, because I think the economy is still, in a lot of people's minds, it's not clear if we're in a recession or we're heading to a deeper recession. But hopefully by mid-2023, we start to settle down and, you know, we can really move forward.
All right, Noi, thank you for joining us this morning. Not good news, but we always love having you on the show. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Right now, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
So, you need to reroute a large shipment from LA to Boston. With XPO, you can make it happen with one call to right here. An XPO team with local connections that will help find a solution. We've spent over 35 years perfecting LTL freight operations to make it easy for our customers to do business with us. Why? Because we're driven to be the best. XPO, your freight first.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation, inflation, inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Can RXO get truckloads of grass to Pittsburgh every month?
Who do you know in Pittsburgh?
Lots of cousins. Always complaining about the grass here.
The grass is bad in Pittsburgh.
Right? It's bitter, like a cruciferous vegetable.
Well, with RXO, you can access over 1.5 million trucks, any mode of transportation, even flatbeds. Just log in.
There's a log right there.
You know what cruciferous means, but not log in?
I'm a complicated creature.
Massive capacity, cutting edge technology. RXO.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our second check of the weather. We touched on what's going on the warm side of this winter storm. Let's move on to the cold side now, where we've got blizzard impacts, we've got low visibility, we've got really terrible roadway conditions going on pretty much everywhere from the Dakotas in through Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, that entire area of the country underneath some really heavy winter weather this morning. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. We've got that radar still on. You can really start to see the circulation of this entire storm. The center of that low pressure hanging out just in the upper corner of Kansas, right along kind of that Kansas, Wyoming, Nebraska junction right there. And that's going to be where we've got the heaviest snowfall going on as well, just to the east of Denver, but right along the I-80 corridor from Cheyenne moving into the far western pieces of Nebraska. Roadway conditions out there deteriorating very quickly this morning. We've got some looks out from the traffic cameras across the area there out just outside of Cheyenne. We can see that the roads are slick. They are snow covered. You've got decreasing visibility in some places. You're going to get to a point today across these areas where you have little to no visibility thanks to blowing snow. And because of this, we do have blizzard warnings in effect pretty much everywhere from Colorado up north into the Dakotas and Nebraska as well. So this does include I-80, this includes I-90, this includes I-70, 76. Basically, interstate travel going to be difficult, if not nearly impossible, by the time that you move through the afternoon into the evening hours of today. Along with that, we mentioned yesterday that it's going to be pretty hard running anywhere up here. If you're going anywhere Chicago westward, if you're going anywhere Milwaukee westward, pretty much just don't today into tomorrow because it's going to be slow going, it's going to be hard, and it'll put your drivers in a very difficult and dangerous situation out there as well. This cold weather, the cold air going to start to sink down into the lower parts of the United States after the storm moves through. But before that, we will see it bringing more wintry precipitation around the Midwest and the Great Lakes as well, and bring that severe weather threat here across the Southeast too. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up later on in the show. Right now, we're going to hand it back over to Anthony Smith.
So much for those updates. Right now, we're welcoming on our next guest, and that's very own Mary O'Connell joining us here this morning, our 3PL expert. Mary, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
So Mary, jumping into it, we're talking about the land of parcel and really what it's looking like going into the upcoming year. What are we seeing at a high level right now? What's the current state of the parcel market?
Yeah, so it's kind of where specifically shippers are getting hit with large increases. I think FedEx and UPS both had increases this year over 6%. That's just the rate base. That's not including those lovely accessorials they like to tack on as well. So really when you're getting an increase, I know there's not much that you can do in some cases, but when you're getting an increase, it's really important to remember that, you need to look at the whole picture, not just necessarily the effect that it has on the base rate. So if you have a lot of remote deliveries, if you're an e-commerce shipper, we really need to be working with your 3PL partner to make sure that you are really understanding what this increase means and how it'll affect the overall impact of your business, because you never know what a 6% increase could just be like, oh, it's only $1 or $2 increase on the base rate. But suddenly there's this remote delivery charge to somewhere that maybe might not be very remote. And suddenly it's an extra $50 per shipment that you have. And while that might not seem a lot, but it just quickly adds up over time. So just really making sure that you're looking at the whole picture when you're going over your increases is going to be the best thing that you can do to make sure that you're prepared for what's going to come for the rest of the year or the rest of your contract period.
Mary, I think when we talk about parcel carriers, there's the big three, right? You've got FedEx, you've got UPS, and you've got the Postal Service. And you've got some smaller carriers who are breaking out specifically doing e-commerce packages, e-commerce parcel delivery, things like that. But for the most part, if you're a shipper who relies on e-commerce, you are probably using FedEx, UPS, or going a slower route through the Postal Service and having to navigate all of the fun things that go along with that, right? We saw that both FedEx and UPS had big-time general rate increases for 2023, well over 6% for both, the biggest in the history of the companies. And this is expected, but can really kind of make or break a shipper's bottom line, right? Is there any way to kind of negotiate some of those rates or maybe flip around your service a little bit to try and bring down some of those really hefty increases?
It's definitely going to you can negotiate sometimes, but I mean, with what we saw this year, you might be able to negotiate them down like 0.5%. They're not going to come down from that like 6, 7, 8%, almost 10 in some cases. They're not going to come down from that to like 2 to 3%. So the biggest advantage that you have is to work with a specialist, like whether it's a 3PL or a parcel consultation company or whatever, to really understand the impact that this increase will have. So whether it's maybe utilizing some more regional carriers, lowering some of your delivery standards, or even just, if UPS has a charge to one zip code that's higher than the other one, then pick a different carrier for that specific zip code. It's a matter of just using the resources you have to overall impact and, make it where it hurts the bottom line a little less. You also can, when you're setting your transportation budget, you can set it where you can kind of almost build in and account for those increases. You can, so when you get your increase of, say it's 6.5%, then add another 2 to 3% on top of that to make sure, just for an extra cushion, because sometimes parcel carriers will hit you with an increase in the middle of the year as well. Or if you are suddenly doing too many packages, then so suddenly if you become too successful and you have too much business, you'll get hit with a charge as well. So it's like, no matter what, there's going to be an extra charge added on for something somewhere. So it's about really just making sure you understand the terms of your contract and that you know exactly what's an applicable charge, how you can work around some of them, and just really try to use it as a partnership. And really maybe even if that's bringing someone else in to help negotiate that contract and not just, approve it because, Jim's been your parcel rep for 20 years and I like the guy. So, and he, treats me nice. So kind of think a little bit bigger than just, well, Jim's pretty fine.
And Mary, kind of along those same lines for shippers this year, and really when they're looking at budgeting their transportation budget, is this going to be some of the things that they need to look at? Or are there any other aspects that they're going to need to consider as they go into this new year?
I mean, it's definitely, I want to say just kind of hurry up and wait, but you can't do that to a budget. So I think it's definitely more of that, maybe if your padding last year was only 2 to 3% and you saw that you were well over that transportation spend, especially in the back half of the year, I would definitely, maybe add a couple more percentages in there. I know one really wants to increase their transportation budget because it's not really a moneymaker for them, but unfortunately, sometimes you do have to do that. So that way you can, ultimately be profitable, be successful, and not cut into any sales or revenue growth just to make up for any excess spend on the transportation side. So especially as we're heading into a slightly more calm 2023, I would definitely, calm compared to the beginning of this year, I definitely would say that, maybe reflect back on some of your 2019, 2018 volumes, kind of use that to be your benchmark to kind of know where you're going, and maybe just add a couple more percentage points to that increase for your transportation budget.
So obviously shippers like to pay for what they see results from, and oftentimes, especially when it comes to parcel carriers, a lot of that is service standards and on-time performance, right? 2020 and 2021 was a really tough time for parcel carriers with on-time performance, but so far, early peak season has every one of the big three operating at above 95% for on-time performance. That's like stellar. That's really, really good, especially to see it so early.
Oh yeah, we love to see that. We
love to see it.
Absolutely love to see that.
Do you think that this is more of an effect of kind of that earlier pushback of the so-called peak season that we saw this year? And now during this really type of typically rushed time around the holidays, we're seeing less volume, seeing more people be easier to breathe for this, which is driving up those on-time percentages? Or is it just that parcel carriers have gotten good?
It's definitely going to be the first one, not the latter. As someone who, as a consumer, still can't get FedEx or UPS to deliver something when they say they're going to, or even Amazon Prime, like, what's a 2-day window, Prime? Don't know her. Anyway, so I definitely think it's because of the latter, because volumes are down across the network. Everyone can kind of more or less like breathe and just say, okay, well, we have been running around like chickens with our heads cut off for the last 1.5 to 2 years. So now we need to sit down and really kind of fix some of the things that are wrong with our network, make sure that we're doing things efficiently. And I mean, we've seen it with even some of the parcel carriers, saying that like, have too much staff, or we anticipated higher volumes, we can handle more per day, but consumers are just not spending that. So I think it's definitely going to be more of that as we move into 2023, potentially even slower, because that peak season that's supposed to come through and be crazy and all the hustle and bustle, we haven't seen it yet. Like, we have not really, we've seen some elevated volumes in certain markets, but not enough to be like a substantial, like, peak season's here. So I definitely think that it's going to just be more of the same as we head into 2023, and potentially parcel carriers will be looking to make up some of that, lost revenue opportunities in the spring or the summer with like a mid-year rate increase. That being said, also, it's going to be, it's just going to be more of a hurry up and wait situation.
Deliver? I hardly know her. Funny. All right, Mary, thank you for joining us today. Great to have you as always. We can catch you on Check Call, right, on Tuesday afternoons?
Tuesday afternoons at 12:30, right after Put That Coffee Down and right before Great Quarter Gals. So hang around this afternoon. You'll see Check Call. We have a really, really, really fun episode today. We went on site to one of the brokerages here in St. Louis, and we just had a good time telling stories, and it is a hoot of an episode. So I'm really excited for everyone to watch it. And you can also check me out on Twitter at Mario_119 or LinkedIn.
Awesome, Mary. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Looking forward to that episode. I'm only imagining some of the flashbacks that maybe you've gotten, but we'll check in with you, and I can't wait to see you on this episode.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
You too, Mary. All right, we're going to head back on over to the wall. We've got our next carrier update ready to go.
Welcome into this carrier update, Donnie. We're going to start off, we left off talking about drive-in rejection rates at these low levels. We brought it up looking at the seasonality view to show just how historically low we are right now.
So here we are. Now, this blue line right here, this is 2019, which was a very tough year. We got 2020 and 2021 up here, which was a very robust year. Where are we at? We are down here at 3.56, which is very close to historical lows. Now, are we going to do this in the next few weeks? I believe it will come back up some, yes, but not anywhere even, when it's kind of sad to say, I'm going to say not near this, and we saw this before. So maybe 7%, maybe, and that's a really big maybe. And the reason why is these big carriers are going to continue just to accept right now. Now, they're going to get in a little bit of a trouble between Christmas and New Year's, because they're going to continue to accept, and they're not going to have the capacity to run the freight. And that might push rejection rates up. And I expect some owner-operators, a lot more owner-operators, to go home for the holidays this year, because the rates aren't there to really, it's not worth them to stay out this year. So that might tighten capacity a lot. So and if we see it, it's going to probably between Christmas and New Year's where these rejection rates kind of push up because of that. And they'll either accept this freight, give it back, or they'll fail it and just pick it up after I hate to say after the first year, a lot of these companies are going to push for this freight to be picked up by midnight on the 31st. Yeah. But we'll see how they do that. We'll see what happens, and there might be some upset customers.
Yeah, that was going to be what I was curious about. I mean, how many do you think will just keep accepting and just take a service failure on it? Because, I mean, it doesn't look great, but
can't get anybody else to run it, though.
Yeah, I mean, your options start to get even more limited around the holidays as is. So.
Yes. So they'll get it worked out. There'll be some upset, but they'll try to keep those numbers up above that 95, 96 mark. Let's jump in here to some maps here. So looking at drive-in still, this is the week-to-week, week-over-week change map. And a little bit different this week, Tony. We have a lot more kind of those, we have some small markets, we have some of those more medium markets as well that are starting to pick up. Yes, our Atlanta, now Joliet, Chicago, a little bit of blue here. But, here, Columbus, down through the southeast, we have some a little bit more blue than what we normally do.
Yeah.
So there are some of these that are picking up, and of course, there's a lot of rural markets here that we see in red.
Yeah.
So there is some movement going on. There is some change going on. Change is good. At least it's not just holding flat. But we have some markets picking up, some markets going down, which is keeping that average going down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd look at like a Kansas City, right? It's got some volume behind it, but it's one of those changing, and I think it's one that we'll look at a little later.
We'll look at Kansas City. We'll look at some Nashville, and here for lanes of the day, and I'll bring those markets up individually. Next chart here, just real quick. Here are your higher rejection rates. This is just rejection rates. The darker the blues, the higher the rejection rates. Now remember, right all through here was some of that weather that Kaylee was talking about. So a lot of snow, and this could cause rejection rates to go up in these markets alone because the trucks that were supposed to deliver there never made it, so therefore they're canceling the loads for the return trips.
Yep.
You need to think about this as well. If you have, obviously this storm area is going from Texas all the way up through, and it's got heavy rains, heavy winds, winds that can blow trucks over, tornadoes, fog, snow, ice. You need to be careful headed this way. So probably best right now to try to keep your trucks going from Midwest, Southeast, or Midwest to the Northeast, or just out west.
Yep, absolutely. Donnie, thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, we'll take a quick break, but we'll be back with more FreightWaves Now.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call, Check Call, Check Call, Check Call. Let's go. Nobody works for free, so why should we be expecting our drivers to? Okay, let's just get it together now. What are some of those proactive steps that you can start taking now? For myself, I would like the Earth to still be here for a little bit longer, but is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, okay. Is pizza an open-faced sandwich? It's bread.
I have been ready for this question. I've seen the show.
We're all in this together.
Thanks for making me hungry. Now I want a hot dog.
You're welcome. Catch episodes of Check Call Tuesdays at 12:30 on FreightWaves TV. Keep up with all things Check Call on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.
The 2023 FreightTech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest FreightTech news at freightwaves.com.
What are you doing up there, Bert?
The RXO folks want us to demo their technology.
That's smart.
Yeah, not really. My beak doesn't work so well on this tablet.
Well, they're paying us now, so.
I know, here goes. Our customers' freight is seamlessly moved anywhere in North America using RXO's digital platform to access over 1.5 million trucks.
That sounded good.
I think I broke my beak.
Massive capacity, cutting edge technology. RXO.
Kids.
And I got
Twitter's having a closet clean out. They're auctioning off a lot of their items, and you can be a part of it. They're auctioning off items from their San Francisco office. Some items include their Twitter statue and @ symbol for planter, chairs, office supplies. There's a lot. I believe it's January 14th or 17th. I can't remember off the top of my head when the auction starts. And all items start at about $25 a piece. Some of them even start at $50 a piece. But switching it up, this week is also the week of a long-time waited sequel to film Avatar. Let's take a look at this this video I found on TikTok.
The massive LA premiere of Avatar: The Way of Water is one of the most immersive and imaginative premieres I've ever seen. Disney managed to recreate the world of Pandora on Hollywood Boulevard. If this glowing forest wasn't a cool enough photo op, there was another complete room where fans were lined up dressed in costume as the Na'vi. And they actually built a waterfall in the middle of Los Angeles. The film stars and other celebs came out to celebrate, including Sigourney Weaver, Zoe Saldana, Henry Cavill, Henry Golding, Heidi Klum, Halle Bailey, and The Weeknd.
That definitely looks pretty dang cool. I know whenever I visited Orlando and saw the Avatar world out there, it looked great, just like that premiere. Looked the same. I'm excited about the movie. I hope you are too, because if it's a success, James Cameron's going to continue with his 4 sequels, I believe, that he's got planned. But anyways, that does it for the Social Roundabout. We're going to take a look at the last 24 hours in freight with our market recap.
We are just one day away from our very last virtual event of 2022.
So is it too late to register?
No.
I can still register?
Yes.
And I will be eligible for a giveaway?
Yes.
And I'll be able to network ahead of the upcoming events in the coming year?
Yes.
Are you messing with me?
No.
So say if I miss some of this stuff, right? Can I still watch some of it on demand?
No.
I can't?
I'm kidding. Yes, you can.
Oh my goodness, this is too good to be true. Christmas came early, and that's right. We have our Domestic Supply Chain Summit coming up tomorrow. And Kaylee, you're going to be hosting that one, right?
Absolutely. Myself and Cindy Edwards will welcome you in starting live tomorrow at 9 a.m. Head on over to live.freightwaves.com to get registered. And you missed the best part, it's totally free to attend. So you don't have to shell out any cash tomorrow to get into those networking opportunities. Just go ahead and head on over, register your information, and we hope to see you starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. You mentioned Anthony, if you miss it, you can head on over to tv.freightwaves.com afterwards to catch it all on demand. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be right back with our second hour of FreightWaves Now in just a few minutes.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
When you have thousands of trucks delivering billions of pounds of freight, you need the right equipment, the right technology, and the right team. At XPO, we provide tuition-free training at 130 XPO driver schools across the country, and the tools drivers need to be at the top of their game, providing rewarding careers for our team members and top-notch service for our customers, while continuing to deliver LTL freight on time and damage-free. XPO, your freight first.
Can RXO get truckloads of grass to Pittsburgh every month?
Who do you know in Pittsburgh?
Lots of cousins. Always complaining about the grass here.
The grass is bad in Pittsburgh.
Right? It's bitter, like a cruciferous vegetable.
Well, with RXO, you can access over 1.5 million trucks, any mode of transportation, even flatbeds. Just log in.
There's a log right there.
You know what cruciferous means, but not log in?
I'm a complicated creature.
Massive capacity, cutting edge technology. RXO.
Welcome into this carrier update. Donnie, get us started here. Looking at some of those markets popping up. First one, as I mentioned, Kansas City.
Yeah, so let's kind of go in and see kind of what's going on. I always, when I look at these markets, I try to call them orange flags, not red flags, not green flags, orange flags. Let's go in and kind of look at them some. So here we're looking at Kansas City, MCI. We see volumes. Yes, they dropped. This is the Thanksgiving drop, but pre-Thanksgiving, post-Thanksgiving, they did drop some. And they've continued down, but kind of bounced back a little. The trend is down slightly, and they're moving back up a little bit. But here on rejection rates, we saw right after December in the first week, it dropped down fairly low, below 4%. Now it's bounced back up to 5.28.
Yeah,
looks a lot more aggressive than actually what it is. It's 128, basis point, a little bit over 128 basis points. But it's on the move back up. So this might be something that you might want to check out. Although rejection rates are still pretty low on this, it's above the actual average.
Yep, absolutely. That's what you're looking for.
Yep. Next chart. Looking at Omaha out there. Well, volumes have gone down some, but they're still fairly, this is a good mid-size, small to mid-size market. But rejection rates are currently sloping downward. But the reason it brought to our attention is because rejection rates are so high. Rejection rates here are 13.24%.
Yeah.
So what you should expect out of this market, rates are probably going to be headed downward right now in the spot market. But this weather event could turn that around very quickly.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of trucks that they were supposed to deliver into these areas today, tomorrow, and they've probably stopped their trucks wherever they didn't pick the freight up.
Yeah.
So it could be a little bit further behind if it's coming out of Chicago or Atlanta or Indianapolis. They'll pick this freight up once the weather has cleared, and it's headed that direction. So it's going to take a while for that to clear up, which is going to make freight back up in this market. This is definitely a market that I would want to keep my eye on if I have freight that can get me in or to or from that market. Definitely to, if I'm maybe got a Memphis to Omaha, accept that and then try to do some spot rates out of Omaha. Next market here, we'll look at Nashville. Nashville again was kind of showing some flags there on those maps here. When we look, volumes are steady, maybe up a little bit here in Nashville. Nashville not being, it's a fairly decent sized market, but it's not a very popular market.
Yeah.
So we look at it, and then we see rejection rates curving up. We see volumes up a little bit. We see rejection rates up to 6% right now. Definitely one to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
People don't try to run to the Nashville market, so you could pick up some extra money on the spot market from these loads.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at that upward curve, and it's been sustained for like 2 weeks, and I think that's the important part. It's not just this short 1 week blip or anything like that. It's been a sustained upward movement there for.
Let's check on our contract versus our spot rates, since we're talking about contract and spot. Here in the blue here, we have our initial reporting of our contracted freight. It went down. Of course, you see it pretty well follows what happens on the spot market here. So spot market here on about the 15th or so started picking back up just a little bit. And here we're averaging $1.81, not including fuel.
Yep.
So I think it's about 79 cents fuel right now. So overall, they're actually pretty close to the same here. This does not have fuel. This does not. Neither one have fuel. But if you add it in, this is going to be a lot better for your contracted rates. I expect contracted rates to pick back up just a little bit and then drop back down after the first of the year.
Absolutely, Donnie. Thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you one more time before the end of the show. Right now, we'll toss it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
Righty, y'all, thank you for that. It's time now to welcome in our next live guest, Phil Schmidbauer, joining us from ODW Logistics, talking about being disciplined on your pricing strategy. Phil, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's dig right into it. We're still seeing LTL carriers fare pretty well in a declining freight market, but you're going to have to get a little bit stringent on how you price in order to stay competitive. Let's talk a little bit about that moving into the start of 2023, what that strategy could look like.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about LTL carriers, generally speaking, they're going to follow a little bit of what truckload is doing, right? And you see truckload rates get depressed. And I think they've been very disciplined on that. Like you've seen some record operating ratios being posted throughout the past, last half of this year. And, we were talking about that the other day, like what's causing it? I mean, when you think about it, you've had a lot of consolidation. You've had carriers, NEMF no longer in business. You've had Roadrunner that's kind of tightened things down and not tried to be everything to everyone. You've got Yellow, who's consolidating all of their different business regional entities into one Yellow, and so that's probably having an impact. I think we saw the other day that they're down on volume 20+%, right? But volume isn't the only game. You've got pricing included in that. So with all this consolidation, I think carriers have been very good about being disciplined on pricing their business, and they're not chasing freight that isn't going to do them a whole lot of good and giving a really low rate just to get volume, right? People have really tightened that down. I would say over the past 3 to 5 years, that's really been a trend with LTL carriers being disciplined on their pricing.
Well, I think that's a great point. The pricing aspect comes into factor even when the volumes are down. We're looking at some of those volumes within the LTL space. Are we seeing certain verticals that are really kind of contributing to some of the decline more than others? When I think of LTL, of course, I think of some of that consumer side, but also we are starting to see some downward movement on manufacturing as well, especially with the latest PMI report and what we're seeing out on new orders and backlogs, things like that. Are there any particular segments that you're watching closely that's feeding into LTL?
That's a great point, Anthony. When you think about it from a whole, I mean, even retail isn't, you're not seeing this late push. And again, last year we're trying to rescue containers from the port. So people were really planning ahead this year for retail season. So a lot of that retail push already happened. So I don't know that there's a specific one we're watching, but we have a wide variety of customers that we handle freight for, and whether it's industrial, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's retail, we're seeing a lot of depressed volumes from everyone across the board. To me, it's a little surprising if you think about it in a silo, how disciplined LTL pricing has been. But when you look at actually what's been happening over the last couple of years and then leading into the end of this year, it's not a total shock, with the consolidation. And we talk about driver shortages all the time, I feel like, but drivers are more abundant today because volumes are down and people are consolidating. And so I feel like it's just it's something to expect, and not sure what next year is going to bring, but we don't expect LTL carriers to start dropping rates to go chase volume at this point.
Phil, when I think about the LTL carriers who have done pretty well, I think about Old Dominion, I think about the segments of ArcBest who have done pretty well, I think about Saia who's had some pretty good performance, consistently performed well throughout the last year and a half. They've been really disciplined on picking freight that works for their network, right? They've done a really good job of kind of figuring out, okay, this works here and we like this, and being super selective about what they're hauling, where they're hauling it. Maybe pricing factors in a little bit to that as well, but really optimizing your network for what you're doing, who you're doing it for, and where you're doing it has helped them succeed. Do you see pulling the pricing into that balance of that optimization is kind of like the icing on the cake to really make it work and make it work well?
Yeah, it's absolutely. There's a lot of people that are focusing on the accessorial charges now. Extended length is one of the big ones, and I remember from my time in LTL and watching drivers try to load freight onto truck that an 8-foot long pipe. It doesn't sound like it's a whole lot, but they've just been really good about getting rid of things that off their trucks or exposing it through extremely high accessorial charges to where nobody's going to want to put it on the trucks anymore. They might as well just buy a truckload for it. So that combination, and again, that discipline has really been evident in the pricing and the operations. And again, the other thing you'll see in LTL carriers these days, it's not a bad thing. This is exactly what the market needs. But when capacity gets tough, they'll pick up the freight that makes the most sense in their network. They'll pick up the freight from providers who are collaborating with them and working with them to make sure A, it's good freight, B, we've got it priced right, and we're moving the freight that works well in our network with our other customers' freight.
And Phil, that leads into my next question, freight that works well into your network. Over the last year or so, it seems like there are quite a few LTL carriers that really start to clear the deck of just, shippers that really were a little bit almost inconvenient to their network to really make room for, all right, this is what's going to be faster, this is going to be more profitable for us. Do we start to see some of them go back on some of those, clear outs that they did before, just to kind of keep some of that value still in their network?
That's something that we're curious on. Like, our people, so again, we've got to talk about this discipline and pricing and discipline and operations. And as we start to see the volumes drop in their networks, we're asking ourselves that same question. Are people going to creep back into that? Hey, we really didn't like this freight that much. It's not as bad as, maybe the long extended pipe or whatever, but we'll be curious to see how people price that freight here coming into the new year. And again, we're nervous about the softness in the economy. And the softness in the volumes and where that's going to go, and truckload pricing is coming down, and we're seeing it kind of tick up now, but we expect it to stay low through the beginning of next year, first quarter. But we're kind of curious to see, where is LTL pricing going to go? Are they going to maintain discipline, or do they need to fill up some volume on those trucks to keep their operations moving, keep drivers employed, that type of thing? So we'll be curious to see where that goes. I don't know that I can give you a solid prediction, but my take is they might come down a little bit, but I think they're going to maintain discipline on pricing for sure.
Phil, I'm going to ask you to give us one more prediction before we let you go here. Is there one thing that you're really looking forward to kind of control that decision-making process on if there's discipline, if there's not? Is it going to be if consumers finally wake up and realize, like, holy cow, we are in this true recession, and they start pulling back? Is it going to be that manufacturing sector, as Anthony mentioned, really starting to pull back and take a break? Or is it just going to be kind of that continued slowdown? There's not going to be like the one make or break moment.
Yeah, we look at a lot of different things. We listen to a lot of what you guys talk about. And Anthony, you gave some great insight on the economy and what you're seeing in manufacturing. We feel like in transportation, we kind of see it first, right? You start to see rates creep down. You start to see softness in what's happening with customers. The orders that our customers are getting from retailers or from manufacturing are kind of slowing down. So we see all of that just it's kind of like watching traffic in front of you. You can see the traffic start to slow down. I don't know if there's one key here. But again, we just maintain discipline on trying to drive, and I was talking to our president the other day about this. Our focus just has to maintain on how do we make our customer supply chains as efficient as possible, right? And that's more important in a down economy than it is in an up economy. But if we just focus on doing the right things, and that goes for everybody, right? Try to be the most efficient with the resources you have, and we'll make it through.
Awesome, Phil. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. If people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Phil Schmidbauer or ODWLogistics.com.
Awesome, Phil. Thank you again. We'll talk to you soon. Right now, we're going to toss it over to Sydney Edwards. She's got our top stories for your 10 a.m. hour.
With a full look at our headlines for the day, I'm Sydney Edwards. Now, FedEx is expanding its no-label, no-box return program, allowing customers to drop off items without packaging. The returned items will be consolidated by merchant at the FedEx office and then will be shipped out to origin locations using an LTL service, most likely FedEx Freight. Now, FedEx has offered this service in select markets since 2020 through a partnership with a company called Happy Returns, but is now opening up the service as an all FedEx-owned offering to market it to a larger group of customers. And ArcBest Chief Finance Officer David Cobb will retire in October of next year, and the company has started searching for his replacement. Cobb worked for 17 years at the company and helped revenue more than double to over $5 billion. Judy McReynolds, the chairman, president, and CEO, said that Cobb's collaborative spirit was valuable in helping ArcBest move into a leading logistics company. Cobb joined ArcBest in 2006 and was named CFO in 2015. Freightos is continuing to expand its offerings, adding a digital booking platform for North American LTL services. Now, the service will eventually allow logistics companies to reserve air and ground delivery through a consolidated tool. The service comes from the Freightos acquisition of 7L, which launched the real-time booking platform with carriers like Saia, Estes, and AAA Cooper on its platform. 7L has managed pre-shipment LTL rates for thousands of freight intermediaries, focused on local pickup and delivery for airport shipments, middle mile shipments, and airlines using trucking networks. Forwarders now can quote faster and electronically dispatch loads. And startup Range Energy is working on creating refrigeration units that run on electricity instead of on diesel in order to save fuel and reduce emissions. Founder and CEO Ali Javedan said that they are simply bringing the electrification of vehicles into a smaller scale unit to run reefer. Now, so far, the company has completed an $8 million seed funding round with participation from Up Partners, R7 Partners, and Yamaha Motor Ventures. The company claims that an electrified trailer could cut emissions by 40% without sacrificing cargo capacity. And this week's drop in weekly Department of Energy benchmark diesel price is the second largest drop ever, falling 21.3 cents per gallon to rest at $4.75. The biggest drop happened right at the start of the 2008 financial crisis, when it fell 21.6 cents in a week. This week's price is the lowest it has been since March of this year, falling 58 cents from its overall high in October of this year. Now, retail prices are continuing to lag behind these huge drops in the benchmark price, with the average retail price sitting $2.18 higher than the average wholesale price. Now, you can find details on these stories and even more happening at freightwaves.com and on our app. And if you're watching us on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated. You can get the full FreightWaves TV experience by logging on to tv.freightwaves.com. I'll hand this over to Kaylee Nix now with a check of our weather.
Anthony, thank you for that. We've talked a lot about the impacts coming from this winter storm that's across the West right now, but we've got to talk about the cold settling in behind it, because it's been a mild couple weeks for most of us here across the United States. That is going to change with this big time pattern shift. So let's check it out in Sonar right now. We've got the temperatures up, and these are forecast temperatures for the next 24 hours. So we can really start to see where that coldest air is settling in as that area of low pressure pulls up to the northwest. Really northeast, that is. Really interesting as well to watch kind of the dichotomy of warm versus cold here, because you can seriously start to see where that warm air is feeding into the fuel for those severe storms. So across the southeast, you've got temperatures getting up into the mid 70s, possibly some 80s along the Gulf Coast for today. That's really going to help to fuel the strongest storms today into tonight and tomorrow morning for us here across the southeast, specifically along Louisiana into Mississippi and Alabama. But behind that, you've got cold air filtering down in from Canada. This here finding maximum temperatures right at that freezing level, highest elevations sitting in the low teens, possibly some single digits, possibly even some negative temperatures for some of those highest places. With that, we will see wind chills as well dip down just around zero, if not just barely negative in some of these spots. So it is going to be pretty cold. Behind that, we've also got high wind warnings in place in some of these spots across those highest elevations in New Mexico and Arizona, as that cold comes with some really strong winds. Because of that, we will be seeing any snowfall and any rain that falls kind of flash freeze behind as the storm system moves through, which will make travel more difficult for an extended period of time out there. As I mentioned earlier, really if you're running anything from east to west along that those lanes, I-70, I-80, I-90, and those further parts of the Midwest to the northern Great Plains, just be super careful and make sure that you're not putting your drivers in any type of dangerous situation out there. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be right back. Tony Mulvey and Joe Antoshak will be back for today's edition of Research Corner. The 2023 FreightTech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest FreightTech news at FreightWaves.com.
So, you need to reroute a large shipment from LA to Boston. With XPO, you can make it happen with one call to right here, an XPO team with local connections that will help find a solution. We've spent over 35 years perfecting LTL freight operations to make it easy for our customers to do business with us. Why? Because we're driven to be the best. XPO, your freight first.
doing up there, Bert?
The RXO folks want us to demo their technology.
That's smart.
Yeah, not really. My beak doesn't work so well on this tablet.
Well, they're paying us now, so...
I know, here goes. Our customers' freight is seamlessly moved anywhere in North America using RXO's digital platform to access over 1.5 million trucks.
That sounded good.
I think I broke my beak.
Massive capacity, cutting-edge technology. RXO.
Welcome into this week's edition of the Research Corner. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined remotely by Joe Antoshak. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. Good morning, Tony.
All good. So, on the show for a second time this morning. Obviously, this morning you talked about that in the FreightTech and kind of that outlook for 2023. We're going to kind of shift gears a little here and talk about the LMI and what the LMI is showing us and kind of how it tracks with our data overall. If you think the LMI is kind of this gauge, right? Anything above 50, so that logistics managers index, anything above 50 on the composite score shows that the industry is growing. Anything below 50, contracting, very similar to the PMI that we talked about this time last week. So going to look at the LMI. We'll bring up a first chart here. It'll be that total composite score. Going back over the last 5 years, we see it's right there at 53.6. So still growing in aggregate, but it's growing at a slower rate, and you can see that by how steep that line's moved down. I think that's a good place to start, Joe. I mean, when you see this, does it come to any surprise to see this kind of industry slowing as a whole?
Yeah, well, I think probably the bigger surprise in my eyes is that the industry is still growing, right? Like all things considered, the composite score is still in growth territory. Now, one thing to note about this, right? I mean, it takes a lot of different factors into account. So it's not, like a slow growth figure, like one that is slightly above 50, is not necessarily, like, it's not suggesting that there's this a lot of expansion happening. Now, what's very interesting is that I believe this is the second lowest score that they've, the second lowest reading they've ever had for the LMI, and I think it's been around for something like 6 years or whatever. So there haven't been there's not a lot of history to say like, oh, this compares to this time or whatever. But I do think we'll probably dip down into contraction territory. I'd have to imagine in the next couple months.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you start looking at some of the underlying indices or those subcomponents of the total composite. I mean, we've got one we'll pull up. I mean, it's transportation prices, right? And we've talked about it all the time, how transportation prices have been coming down. I mean, we look at it in contract rates, look at it at the spot rate. I mean, just overall, we're kind of obviously in that contraction mode. We see it right here in the LMI, right? We're talking down to 37.4. I mean, we were at 90 earlier this year. So, I mean, we were seeing, you can kind of see that, the switch flip. And we saw it stay in this growth phase. And I mean, overall, you saw contracted rates, especially early in the year, continue to rise, even as spot rates were falling, and then it kind of all shifted. And it shifted right around the time this entered that contraction mode. So it's really just, this one to me is how quickly we went from one extreme to the other. Because I mean, you look at this, and it's the lowest level at any point in the last 5 years right now.
Yeah, I mean, really like a pretty significant bullwhip effect, and right, it is very near to the time that we started making our calls based on sonar data. And what's interesting about these indexes, this composite index, is that they're asking people that theoretically would know about FreightWaves, potentially, you know, our sonar subscribers, that kind of thing. So, you know, it's sort of tough to know how much of a role we played, but the index seems to suggest that kind of our calls are having some sort of an effect here.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I mean, I saw it this morning, somebody talking about peak season or the lack thereof dating back into October, and you see it. And we were talking about it in October, and I mean, you're kind of seeing those impacts show up in broader data, and it just kind of shows that, hey, this real-time data is valuable because it's allowing to make the calls, but also show what's happening in the world right now, not waiting for a few months. We'll bring up our next chart, and it's our VCR PM, our initial reported van contract rate. That'll be in that blue line. And then you see our NTI, so that 7-day rolling in or spot rate that includes fuel. You see they're really close together right now, but it goes back. You saw that increase where we were talking about that expansionary time frame in transportation prices that we saw in the LMI. Right around the same time you saw it enter contraction, we had already seen spot rates start to come down. Contract rates started to follow suit. I mean, and that's natural when you start to think about it. And with this, there's room to run on the contract side. I mean, as we enter the first quarter, I mean, I think that's been the talk is how far do contract rates really go down? I mean, we don't think we're at the bottom for spot rates. Well, contract rates are 3, 6, 9 months behind those spot rates. Like, there's that runway for contracts to rebid down, or as the RFP process right now is going, bid season's going on. There is going to be a pretty substantial decline there in contract prices, I think, as we move to the first quarter. I mean, Joe, what do you think about that?
I think that's an extremely safe bet, right? I mean, the way I've been thinking about this index and just sort of the, you know, like the core inflation data that came out today is like, all this data is painting a picture of us in the transportation world, but then also outside of it, we're sort of like in the middle of this down cycle, it seems. And you know, we're not yet seeing the point where it's like, okay, we're now coming out of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think there's any signs that we're exiting this. We haven't hit the bottom, that's for sure. I mean, is there going to be a time in 2023 where things maybe start to get better? That's the hope. I mean, I think that's, I think everybody wants it to get better, but it's almost like one of those instances right now, it almost has to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I think sometime next year we'll probably start to see the data that suggests, okay, we're swooping out of it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that will come. But Joe, that is all the time we have for this week's edition of the Research Corner. Thank you so much for joining me. Go check out Joe's article on the FreightTech, what's going to happen in FreightTech in 2023. Right now, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more FreightWaves Now.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
This is an LTL freight cross-dock facility, and we have locations like this all across North America. East Coast, West Coast, even our neighbors to the north and south. At XPO, our network helps us deliver 18 billion pounds of freight every year to 99% of US zip codes and beyond. And now, it's getting even bigger because we're adding 900 new doors to our terminals. XPO, your freight first.
Canard so get truckloads of grass to Pittsburgh every month?
Who do you know in Pittsburgh?
Lots of cousins. Always complaining about the grass there.
The grass is bad in Pittsburgh.
Right? It's bitter, like a cruciferous vegetable.
Well, with RXO, you can access over 1.5 million trucks, any mode of transportation, even flatbeds. Just log in.
There's the log right there.
You know what cruciferous means, but not log in?
I'm a complicated creature.
Massive capacity, cutting-edge technology. RXO.
Welcome into our final carrier update of the morning. Donnie, going to break it down into our lanes of the day. We touched on those three markets. We're going to start looking at it, one being Omaha, where we saw rejection rates kind of moving down, but there was the weather, and they're really high still. I mean, talking 13%.
Yeah. But still, over the last, 13% is a very good rejection rate. Pretty much means the spot rates are higher than your contracted rates on those lanes, on a lot of those lanes. So if you look back here over the last few weeks here, you'll see that rates have been moving up on the Omaha to Chicago lane. Now, it's still well below our NTI, but it's still $2.32. So just keep that in mind. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit and switch to see what Chicago going back to Omaha is. So if you hit a little double arrows button there, and we'll see this switch here going back, it's $3.10 a mile. So this might be, this could still be a good lane to run because you're going to be average still about 270 if you're looking at just spot rates. Now, if you can find contracted freight that may get you Omaha into Chicago, then you might spot freight it back out to Omaha, and you could probably make a little bit better money.
And that's been kind of this overarching theme recently, right, with Chicago especially. Outbound Chicago rates have been moving up, pretty much going anywhere. And
But this is going to be a lane you're going to have to be very careful over the weather that's coming in.
Absolutely.
So this may push prices up for Omaha and Chicago even more if you're looking at spot rates there, or even Chicago going out because nobody wants to go into the weather. So freight's going to back up in Chicago, and this could boost those rates as well. But you see they're already moving up as well over the past few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's stuff to pay attention to over the next week.
It's a 467-mile run. This is a pretty good lane, I still think. Let's go to the next chart here. Kansas City to Atlanta. NTI, it's just above at 267. Going into the southeast, I'll keep my eye on it. Is this a good lane? Well, let's obviously hit our little double arrows and see what it is going back from Atlanta to Kansas City. So hit my little double arrows there. Atlanta going back way below. So this is a pretty tough lane here. You maybe if you were based in Atlanta and you had contracted freight going to Kansas City where you could take maybe some spot freight and get back, maybe. But this lane right here, this is a little bit cheap. This is a lane that I would not want to run on the spot market if I was a carrier.
Yeah, absolutely. One more?
We can get one more in here right quick. Nashville to Indianapolis. This is a good lane here. It's still 288 miles. It's a shorter run, but it's 338. So we're above that $3 mark. Hit my double arrows here. We're running out of time. Indianapolis coming back, 376.
Yeah.
So here's a good lane that you could average over 350 a mile. And it's a shorter haul, but if you keep that truck moving and time it right, you'll be good to go.
Absolutely, Donnie. Thank you so much for the updates this morning. We'll be sure to check with you Thursday because we don't have a show for the Domestic Supply Chain Summit. But thank you again. Right now, we'll toss it over to Christian Thomas.
Thanks, Tony and Donnie, for those updates. I'm Christian Thomas. Welcome to Social Roundabout. Now, Twitter, they're cleaning out their closets and they're auctioning off their items from the office in their San Francisco office. Let's take a look at this tweet or this tweet that somebody sent out about some of the items being sold on January 17th. Looks like a big bird statue, their Twitter bird statue, an @ symbol, that's a planter. They also have a lot of office supplies. I believe I saw in there a bunch of like coffee equipment too. So kind of interesting. Again, January 17th, selling all their stuff. Switching it up a bit, this week is the week that Avatar, The Way of the Water releases. Long-awaited sequel for me. I've really enjoyed the first one. Let's take a look at the premiere from last night, worldwide premiere from last night.
The massive LA premiere of Avatar: The Way of Water is one of the most immersive and imaginative premieres I've ever seen. Disney managed to recreate the world of Pandora on Hollywood Boulevard. If this glowing forest wasn't a cool enough photo op, there was another complete room where fans were lined up dressed in costume as the Na'vi. And they actually built a waterfall in the middle of Los Angeles. The film stars and other celebs came out to celebrate, including Sigourney Weaver, Zoe Saldana, Henry Cavill, Henry Golding, Heidi Klum, Halle Bailey, and The Weeknd.
Very long-awaited anticipation for that premiere of the the sequel to Avatar. I can't wait for it. That does it for this Social Roundabout. I'm going to toss it to a quick break, and we'll be back with the Roundtable.
The 2023 FreightTech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest FreightTech news at FreightWaves.com.
Hold on a second, Tony. See that? No scrapes, no scuffs, no damage. Thank you. Because we make sure each pallet is touched as few times as possible and that is handled with care, no matter where it's going. That's the precision you get from a nationwide LTL freight company with over 35 years of industry-leading experience, an entire team that's driven to deliver on time and damage-free.
XPO, your freight, first.
What are you doing up there, Bert?
The RXO folks want us to demo their technology.
That's smart.
Yeah, not really. My beak doesn't work so well on this tablet.
Well, they're paying us now, so.
I know, here goes. Our customers' freight is seamlessly moved anywhere in North America using RXO's digital platform to access over 1.5 million trucks.
That sounded good.
I think I broke my beak.
Massive capacity, cutting-edge technology. RXO.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for a final check of our weather here on your Tuesday. This winter storm that's across the entire western half of the United States right now is pretty robust. It's going to bring lots of impacts all the way from the far northern Great Plains down through the deep south today, tomorrow, and into your Thursday. So let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. You can really start to see the entire shape of this winter storm as that center of low pressure spins across the northwestern corner of Kansas right now. Lots going on because we've got snow in the cold sector. You've got mixed precipitation and strong winds on the front side. You've got severe weather all the way down into the Dallas-Fort Worth metro. So let's just go piece by piece right now. The tornado watch that was existing to the west side of the Dallas-Fort Worth metro has been allowed to expire, but it has now been expanded eastwards into that Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas border. So tornado watch still in effect for the far southeastern corner of Oklahoma, for the southwestern corner of Arkansas, and then all the way in East Texas. Does include Waco, does include Tyler, Longview, and the I-20 corridor moving eastward. These storms are going to pick up more steam, move faster, and be stronger as we head throughout the day today. We also could be watching for an initial wave of storms to kick up ahead of this big, stronger line this morning into the early parts of this afternoon. So folks from Louisiana up through Arkansas into western Mississippi need to be on the lookout today. Need to be making sure that you've got severe weather plans in place because it is going to be a threat this morning into this afternoon. For tomorrow, that threat shifts further eastward, does include East Mississippi, western Alabama, and along the Gulf Coast as well. Because as these move on through, they'll keep their strength and continue to move, honestly, pretty quickly to the east. Strong winds, embedded tornadoes, heavy rainfall, possibly some small hail included in these as well. Further up towards the north on the cold side of this, we've got some snow and some blizzard conditions going on in that northwestern quadrant of this storm. So all the way from South Dakota down through Nebraska, Wyoming into Colorado, you've got heavy snowfall right now, and you've got also some blizzard conditions going on along those interstates. So visibility is dropping and travel is almost next to impossible in some of these places. What we're going to be seeing is actually some places where travel will not be possible at all today into tomorrow because these blizzard conditions will get so bad. You'll have whiteout conditions in some places thanks to those strong winds and the blowing snow. Same thing on the front side of this storm where we've got mixed precipitation going on up towards the Iowa area, eventually wrapping up into Minnesota and Wisconsin. I said it earlier, if you've got any freight moving from Chicago, Milwaukee, that Great Lakes area westward, give it extra time. Make sure you're taking care of your drivers, paying attention so that they're not driving into dangerous situations. Just being a little bit patient as this storm is pretty widespread and will continue to progress into the afternoon hours today and the morning tomorrow. That's it for weather. We're going to go ahead and move into the hot seat today. We'll be there in just a few minutes.
Welcome into the hot seat once again. I'm Bill Priestley. This is where we take an unsuspecting individual, give them 10 questions they have to answer, bring those answers straight to you here in this format. And joining us today, senior freightcaster and senior meteorologist Kaylee Nix joining us. How you doing, Kaylee?
Super great. Glad to be on the hot seat.
All right, you ready for 10 questions?
Let's do it.
I need 10 answers. Number one, normally a question about what you think your company is trying to solve, well, probably trying to solve. Rather, let me ask you this. What is the number one problem in freight right now that you think needs to be addressed and solved as quickly as possible?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think the number one problem in freight is probably the ridiculousness of how the market swings back and forth due to folks' overcorrection. COVID, of course, threw us off pretty big time, but I definitely think that we need to have a focus on less overreaction and maybe some more proactive activity.
Nice. All right. Number two, who is the guest you most want to have on FreightWaves Now or Great Quarter Gals that you have not had already?
So myself and Grace Sharkey literally talk about this all the time. Our number one Great Quarter Gals guest, it's Carol Tomei from UPS. That is one of our bucket list guests. So Carol, every time we say this, if you're watching, come on the show.
All right. Excellent. Nice solicitation there as well. Number three, what's actually going through your head when you step out on the stage at F3 and see all the movers and shakers in the freight industry?
Not a single thing. Nothing. Totally mind blank. Because here's the thing, you walk out on the stage, the lights are so bright that you can really only see the people in the first few rows or so. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes those seats aren't necessarily occupied. But basically the secret sauce on this is that you walk out, you kind of just blur your eyes so that way you can't see anything at all. And then there's nothing going on. Whatever comes out of my mouth comes out of my mouth, and chances are no one will remember it in 5 minutes anyways.
So you don't subscribe to the looking at everybody as if they're naked?
Absolutely not. I just don't look at anybody at all.
All right. Number 4, what is the next great achievement of women in freight?
Oh, this is a really good question. I don't know if it's a tangible achievement, but I think that we will really achieve something. It will be a big milestone when we can get women into the industry without a fear of their safety. And that's not even necessarily just from a driver's perspective, because of course drivers are a target a lot of the times with women in safety, but women feeling safe in the general workplace, women feeling safe from sexual harassment, feeling safe to speak up in their workplace, women feeling like they belong in their workplace no matter their role. That is the next milestone achievement.
All right. Number 5, what's the most famous person you've ever seen or run into at an airport, bus station, or just getting an Uber on the side of the road?
I don't necessarily know if I've run into anyone famous that I can think of. This one puts me on the spot, but I don't really know.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Number 6, you get to have dinner with anyone in the freight industry, living or dead. Who do you want to have dinner with?
Bill, you are making these questions really difficult for me.
That's why it's called the hot seat, Kaylee.
I think that I would want to sit down with Craig. And like, that's pretty accessible, right? Like his office is right next door. But I think that I would want to sit down with Craig, have dinner with him, maybe pick his brain. I'm actually going to say the entire Fuller family. So Craig, his 2 brothers, his mom and his dad.
Okay, all right. You're from New Mexico. You've lived in Oklahoma. You've traveled to Texas quite a bit. I've asked this question because I've had a number of people do this, and I'm just asking for references. If I want to drive from the southeast to Southern California, what's the best route to take?
Okay, so if we're starting in Chattanooga, you go Chattanooga, you take, was it 24 to 59 through Birmingham, 59 to 20, you're on 20 all the way through Dallas. You catch Dallas and then you go up around, you hit 40, go through Amarillo, and then 40 goes through Albuquerque, and then all the way through Arizona. Eventually you end up in LA. But it takes 16 hours to drive from Albuquerque, New Mexico to LA, Southern California. So you're looking at probably about a 2.5-day road trip.
All right, that's exactly what I wanted to hear from you there. Number 8, what is something you think will be mainstream in 10 years that is not mainstream now?
Specific to the freight industry?
Yes.
I think specific to the freight industry, actual transparency around what's going on in your deal making. So we know, like, obviously the FMCSA just came out with clarifications on dispatch services. I think that that is the first step to everybody being honest about what goes on when they are buying and selling freight.
All right, number 9, another oddball question here for you. I'm giving you a semi, it's full of gas, it's got a trailer attached to it that's full of party supplies. Where are you going to take it to put on a party for the entire FreightWaves staff, and what's the theme of the party?
That's a really good question, too. I think I'm going to take it to Chicago. And we're going to put on a party that is like Winter Wonderland themed, because the last time all the FreightWaves crew was in Chicago was 2019, and it was an event that was up there. They got stranded in a blizzard. It's like FreightWaves legend, this story, right? They still managed to put on this event, but I don't think anyone had a good time. And so I think that I would go and take the pressure of the event off of it, but just have a winter themed party and be like, guys, let's reminisce a little bit.
It's not bad to be lost in Chicago there anyway, even if you're snowed in. Last question. I know you've been rehearsing this one. Complete this sentence. Freight is blank.
Freight is fascinating. Absolutely, just hands down fascinating. There's always something new to learn, always someone new to talk to, always something new entering the industry, leaving the industry. It's always changing, and it impacts everybody's life.
It does as well. Kaylee Nix, you are off the hot seat.
Thanks, Phil.
With a last look at our headlines for the day, I'm Sydney Edwards. Now, startup Range Energy is working on creating refrigeration units that run on electricity instead of diesel in order to save fuel and reduce emissions. Founder and CEO Ali Javedan said that they are simply bringing the electrification of vehicles into a smaller scale unit to run reefers. So far, the company has completed an $8 million seed funding round with participation from Up Partners, R7 Partners, and Yamaha Motor Ventures. The company claims that an electrified trailer could cut emissions by 40% without sacrificing cargo capacity. This week's drop in the weekly Department of Energy benchmark diesel price is the second largest drop ever, falling 21.3 cents per gallon to rest at $4.75. The biggest drop happened right at the start of the 2008 financial crisis, when it fell 21.6 cents in 1 week. This week's price is the lowest it has been since March of this year, falling 58 cents from its overall high in October of this year. Retail prices are continuing to lag behind these huge drops in the benchmark price, with the average retail price sitting at $2.18 higher than the average wholesale price. And the next step in the AB5 and Proposition 22 legislation in California will take place today in an appellate court. In August of 2021, a Superior Court judge ruled that Prop 22, which blocks AB5 from affecting gig drivers in California, is unconstitutional due to a conflicting with aspects of the state's workers' compensation laws. The ruling overturned Prop 22, but it stayed in place while the appeal ran its course. Now, the case will be heard in the First District Court today of Appeals, and the measure was approved by voters with a 59% majority in a 2020 election, supported by huge campaigns from Uber, DoorDash, and Lyft. Now, you can find details on these stories and even more happening at FreightWaves.com and on our FreightWaves app. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, whether it's live or on demand, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated. Now, you can get the full FreightWaves TV experience by logging on to tv.freightwaves.com. I'll hand this on over now to Kaylee Nix and Anthony Smith for the rest of our show.
All right, Cindy, thanks for that. And we are done here for your Tuesday morning, but we won't be back tomorrow because we got a special event.
That's right. There's going to be an event tomorrow, and we're not done for the day. We also have more content coming up. We have Put That Coffee Down that'll be on a little bit later. We also have Loaded and Rolling and Check Call.
Absolutely. Tuesdays are loaded, and we will be rolling here on FreightWaves TV. You see what I did. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. And speaking of our event, it's still time to get registered. Head on over to live.freightwaves.com. It is free registration for tomorrow's Domestic Supply Chain Summit. We'll get started here right at 9.
That's right. And there's registration comes with a giveaway, so you'll be eligible once you register. And of course, it is free. And it's a great opportunity to get networking ahead of the new year and our next in-person event, which will be in Cleveland.
For sure. Check it out. That Sonos sound system. All you have to do is put in your information and stay active in our live chats. Increase your chances to win. We'll be back Thursday morning starting live at 9 for more FreightWaves Now. Until then, you can catch myself and Sydney Edwards hosting your Domestic Supply Chain Summit tomorrow.
See you then.
Chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to